swifter than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird brain, it's a plane, it's iWalter. Yes, it's iWalter, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. iWalter, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend ears with his annoying voice, and who disguised as Walter Interranti, mild-mannered janitor for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, nonsense, and the American way. And now, another exciting episode in the adventures of iWalter.
Hey everyone, this is Walter from iWalter. I wasn't expecting to do a show this weekend. I thought I did one which would cover the whole week, but then I was listening to some radio programs that are, conservative radio shows, because there's not much on the radio on the weekend. And the radio station I listen to, by the way, is actually up in Harrisburg of PA, because they play a lot of the shows I like to listen to. Glenn Beck in the morning when I get up, because I get up earlier now. Rush in the afternoon. Sean Hannity actually is on later at night on this station in Harrisburg. It's 580, by the way. And then there is I already said Glenn Beck. I'm trying to think right now. Ken Matthews. Thank you. So I was listening to Ken Matthews, and it was to recap. He actually wasn't on Friday's show. He actually had taken off. And it was like, okay, this guy's pretty cool. He's talking about some neat stuff. Now, Ken Matthews on Friday, he calls it Kenspiracy Friday. So that's his thing for Friday's show. Rush calls it Open Line Friday. Everybody has their own thing for different days of the week, these talk show hosts. So anyway, it's kind of weird. I have to use iHeartRadio to listen to these, because that's one way I can get, it's like having satellite radio without the hookup, and it's just as good as satellite as iHeart. And you can get a lot of other stuff on there. I'm going to end up having to pay for it, I guess, because it's a free station. I mean, a free setup for the basic, and that's all I listen to on iHeart. But now they decided they're going to start charging even for the free stuff, so it's not free anymore. Anyway, it was like something I heard on Ken Matthews that actually was him on Thursday's show, because it bled over from Friday's show, the way they have them lined up, to the third hour of Thursday's show. It was like he was talking about something. He had a caller who had called in, and I was taking my shower this afternoon, and this caller brought up an interesting topic, which is why I'm doing this podcast now. And he basically was saying, I'm trying to put my thoughts together. He actually said about what happened with Clinton in this whole housing market thing that happened years ago. So it was like, wow, this is actually really good. I need to use this for a podcast now. So I did. I ripped it, and I try to get right to the main point he was trying to get to. And I actually texted it to a friend, so I'm going to see, because I actually found an article then that did not show up on my Facebook page. Yeah, I can't even find it anyway. For some reason it's not showing up. But yeah, about the whole housing market scam that happened back with Clinton. So it's put into words, so to, it's spoken about much more clearly than I ever could do. And it was like, that alone was like, okay, this is definitely worth, doing a podcast on. So I want to play that soundbite. It's kind of long. I try to cut it back as best as possible, but it's still a little bit lengthy. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that fact. I think it's over 6 minutes long. And, I tried to edit it because originally, there was a couple topics he was talking about, Ken Matthews, and it was like 13 minutes. So for me, that's pretty good. I actually cut it from 13 down to to 6.5 minutes, but that's still long. Don't get me wrong. So I want to play this because, again, if it's me just saying this stuff, it's just called hearsay, or it's just thought of as hearsay, like, well, you don't have nothing to back this up. Well, Ken Matthews does a lot of research on anything he talks about. So I think hearing it from him may give people a different point of view than me just, basically, I hate to say this, instead of me just like people saying, well, you're just talking out of your ass. You have no clue what you're talking about, Walter. Well, this man does. So here you go. Here is Ken Matthews. And it's right after he hangs up with this gentleman who called in and kind of got Ken Matthews all worked up on Thursday. And I thought it was really good. So here we go.
We've already disconnected him, just not for any particular reason, but the call was over. But I'm asking you or Al, I think it was the book, The Road to Serfdom, which is very close to what Al was just talking about, and it lays it out. And if you didn't catch what he said about the Bill Clinton thing, a lot of people do believe, and I agree, that the 2008 collapse can be traced back to when the government, under pressure by the Clinton administration, said to the banks, you have to loosen up your lending restrictions because you are being discriminatory. Now, the banks were not being discriminatory. They were just trying to make sure that the loans were not risky. This is back before you heard about banks taking advantage of whatever and all these other things. But the way it started back in the day, you had to have the right debt to income ratio, and you had to have a particular credit score, and you had to have certain investments, and you just couldn't walk in and say, hey, I work at Subway, I want to buy a $400,000 house on a $27,000 salary, and I also want to get a 4-car garage. But the Clintons thought, you know what we'll do? We'll force banks to lower the limits and lower the restrictions and the qualifications and the requirements for certain minorities in certain areas. That way, the Democrats will look as if they're helping those communities. And it's so sad because isn't it interesting when you go to all the see what you started, Al? You got me now all thinking back. When you go back, you go back to a Detroit. Look at how Detroit crumbled, and there's now parts. This is one of the best kept secrets of news media right now. There's parts of Atlanta that are crumbling as well, with criminality and bad investments and whatever, and drugs, etc. And that's plaguing the whole country. But Clinton thought, and I'm sure a lot of Democrats, I mean, what was it? Was it Dodd-Frank? That's another farce. But we don't have time to break that open today. So Clinton thought, we'll lower these qualifications, and then the couple that works and they save up, and now they're 30 and they've got 10 years of savings, and they want to put 55 down on a $175,000 house, and they're each making 40 grand. You put that in the hopper and it makes total sense. Well, that's not fair to what? To the Democratic, liberal, progressive minority voter who says this isn't fair. I'm working here, I'm working there, and I've got bad credit, I'm in debt, and I can't buy a home, and it's just not fair, and America's not fair, and it's not part of the American dream. So in typical fashion, the liberal progressives did exactly what they do in schools. They lower the standards, and that's what they did. And they said to banks, if you don't, we'll come after you. If you don't, we'll say that you are using discriminatory or prejudicial loan practices. And the bankers would say, well, no, we have the same rules for everyone. If you're a black man and you have the right income, you can buy this. Or if you're a white man and you have the right income. And the Democrat progressive left led us to believe that in the 90s, remember the time, in the 90s, minorities would go into a bank and the bank would say, we're not going to loan to you. You're Latino, you're black. And I hate to pop your bubble, but in capitalism, banks will loan to anyone who is a good risk. It was about the green with the banks, as it should be. It wasn't about the color of someone's skin. But in typical fashion, the Democrats made it about the people's skin color. And then what happened? Early 2000s, late 90s, but what happened by the end of George Bush's term? You had people so upside down in their homes. And then the housing market just tanked. But keep in mind, that also opened the door for those same people to be taken advantage of. See, this is the problem, and this is what I think a lot of progressive liberals don't understand. The more regulation, the more chance for the system to be abused. I know that sounds counterintuitive. The more laws, the more chance laws will be broken. The more regulation, the more opportunity for loopholes. The thicker the tax code, the more people can play the IRS if they have enough money and if they're unethical to do so. If things were just simplified, and here's how you would simplify it. Here's the rules of the bank. We don't care what color you are or whatever. If you have this amount of money and this credit rating and this debt-to-income ratio, then you could buy this house. If not, come back when you do. But the Clintons and Obama, they all put a stop to that. There had to be a different standard. Because if there wasn't, guess what you'd be called? That's right. A racist. Or worse, a Trumper. But that was later.
All right. Yes, I'm the Trumper, by the way. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. I heard this today, and this afternoon. It was from Thursday's show on Ken Matthews. Really caught my attention, and it was like, yeah, I really got to, do a podcast just on that alone. It was a little bit long, so I apologize about that, but it was definitely very informative, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did listening to it. It doesn't make things better. It just brings things to light, and that's what I like about Ken Matthews. He's from Pennsylvania. He's from Harrisburg, and he does a show Monday through Friday at it's at like 3 o'clock, 3 to 6. So no, it's 3 hour sets. Wait, yeah, that's correct, 3 to 6. So anyway, yeah, it was. I just had to bring that up. Anyway, it was when I was looking for okay, I need to rip this, and that's actually the way it sounds. That quality that sounds really bad is the way that you hear it on iHeartRadio, and I don't know what it is about that station that Ken Matthews works on, but anybody who's on there, their voice sound quality sounds pretty poor, and I ripped it right from the computer, and it sounds exactly like you're going to hear it if you actually tuned into his show on the podcast section. If you actually listen to him live, it doesn't sound that bad. But anyway, yeah, I pulled up some article. It was kind of short. No, it's actually kind of long. I thought it was actually shorter than it's looking like now. But I did put it on my Facebook page, and it was titled, Unaffordable Housing and Political Kickbacks Rocked the American Economy. So it's a kind of lengthy, possibly like a PDF file, but it's on the facts that happened back when Clinton and Obama were, giving these tax breaks, or, this option for people who couldn't afford homes to be able to purchase, get a loan from the bank, even though they knew, up front that these people aren't going to be able to pay these loans back, and allowing them to buy a home for $400,000. Now, I don't know if that's all in this PDF kind of file, but it is pretty lengthy. You can read it, but just go to my Facebook page. Or again, it's called Oversight House.gov, and then just look for this unaffordable housing and political kickbacks rocked the American economy. So you can probably find it on your own if you look under Google, I'm sure. Anyway, there was another thing that was interesting. My friend Todd had mentioned, I think yesterday when I was talking to him live, that really upset him. But before I go into that, it was kind of strange. Todd actually sent me an article. I live outside of Norristown. I'm technically a Norristown address with my zip code, even though I'm not directly in Norristown. And he sent that there was a multi-alarm fire that's been spread through the apartments, certain apartments in it says Montgomery Mill Apartments on 7500 block of Kelly Drive. That's in Norristown. They're basically been, there was a big fire, a big blaze right now going on. So thank you for that story, Todd. I appreciate any, news stories that you may find anybody, and if you put them, I'll mention them. And this one actually came up as I started doing my podcast, so it was actually perfect time, and I let him know. But yeah, my friend Todd was talking about, he was really upset that this whole thing with Stroke writing text to he's married, but he was fooling around with some other woman who was married. He's an FBI investigator, and he was writing text. They were mentioning this on Fox News that basically said Trump's never going to get. We're going to make sure that Trump never gets elected, which obviously backfired. And it was on Fox News. His actual texts were exposed. And, Lisa Page. So it says, so I had to look it up. After he told me this, he was really upset about it. It's like, I understand why. That's why he even my friend Todd changed from being an independent to being now a Republican, because he's just so fed up with all this nonsense that you constantly hear nonstop about how much Trump is such a bad president, which is far from the truth. So I did find a couple articles, and every one I found, I was like, okay, I'm going to post these on Facebook. I'm sure I'm going to make more enemies this way. So it was from National Review. I found one. It says FBI agent Peter Stroke in text to Lisa Page, quote unquote, worst stop Trump from becoming president. So I made sure to post that. And it's not long, but it just FBI agent Peter Stroke, who was intermittently involved in the Hillary Clinton email investigation and the probe of Russian election meddling, vowed to stop Donald Trump, in his text, from reacting to reaching the White House. Excuse me for that. Reaching the White House in August 2016 text message to the FBI lawyer Lisa Page. He was fooling around with this woman, Lisa Page, this Stroke character. So, yeah, and it was more than just that. It was some pretty nasty things he had wrote, or had texted to Lisa Page. I don't know if I have that one that was in the title. They had to bleep it out. But yeah, it just fell on deaf ears, and it's still falling on deaf ears, this whole thing with Peter Stroke. I mean, the guy got caught red-handed. They pulled his text that he had texted to Lisa Page, basically saying, "Now this is not going to happen. He's not going to. We're going to make sure we do everything in our power to make sure that Trump does not become our next president." And it just miserably failed, and yet people are still insistent that Hillary was mistreated and this was an unfair election, which is none of it's true. That's the problem. This is one I'm looking for. It was actually from the WashingtonTimes.com. And it's just the title alone. I guess I can see why my friend Todd was even upset. He probably didn't dig into it as much as I did. It says, it was a quote from Stroke, and it basically says, Trump, I shouldn't be laughing about this. Trump is an effing idiot, ranted FBI agent Peter Strzok in a text message handed to Congress. So, yeah, they bleeped out the F word. So, this was such a biased election against a Republican candidate, a person who had won. And all you ever hear is how the Democrat side is just being constantly victimized, which is really, I don't see it, but you keep on insisting that the Democrat side was so victimized. And yet all you see and what comes out from them trying to slander the right is that they continually lie and get away with it, and they just make themselves look worse and worse as our other party. So I don't know. I don't see I don't see how this can continue on and how people can be so naive on what is going on. So I just really had to mention that, by the way, because I just don't understand. There was something else. That's all I basically had to talk about. So yeah, this was actually going to be less than a half an hour show. And I really don't want to fill with a bunch of nonsense because that just irritates people. And it's a bad weekend for me. It's Father's Day tomorrow for my, and I got something for my father, but it's just really difficult because the thing on my mind is coming up on Monday of me seeing what's going to happen with my job. That's my main focus right now more than anything else. And plus, I mentioned this before, but we have a broken air conditioning system, unit, and my parents are out right now, so I can have plenty of ventilation. I have every window open in the house, every fan outside of my studio room, blowing air throughout the house to draw out the heat because it's very hot otherwise. In fact, right now it's 83 degrees outside, so usually it's about 10 degrees hotter in our house. So that would make it like 93 degrees. So yeah, it's not very comfortable. So anyway, that was what I had mainly on my topics of discussion for news source information. So on a lighter note, and trust me, I really wanted to pre-order one of these. It's another thing, a toy for me to buy. But I just don't have the money right now, so I can't even do a pre-order. And by the time I can figure out, I guarantee you this limited edition pre-order on, get this, an Atari VHS retro system is going to be gone. Now, I grew up in the 70s. I had my first gaming console. I think it was probably was Pong. That was the only thing out there back in the 70s. And I think the problem was it ruined your TV set. So not too long afterwards, when we used to have, a couple department stores over the King of Prussia Mall that no longer exist. And it was, Penny's was the last one that was around from the original King of Prussia Mall. That's gone now. I remember being a little kid, 12 years old or something like that. Telling my dad what I want for Christmas, and it was an Atari 2600. And then years later, still a kid though, I wanted a ColecoVision. And I felt bad, but I really put the pressure on my father, and he actually came through and he got me this stuff. And games I used to buy for that damn system, or he bought for me for that system, was like space. They were expensive. They were like $50 for crappy graphics. And I remember telling him, okay, I want Donkey Kong because they made that one from ColecoVision. I think I still had the Atari system at that point. And it looked so horrible. I was so pissed for the Atari 2600. So I ended up having my dad buy me a ColecoVision so I just could get Donkey Kong, because that was like the game I loved the most in the arcades. But anyway, when I had the Atari 2600 and then eventually ColecoVision, I had a ton of games. Some of them were from Activision and some other company that made like space kind of games. For Matt, it would be Space Creatures and Space Creepers. No, but seriously, there was a couple games I liked, and I can't remember the name of any of them. Besides Laser Blast, it had not much to do besides shooting lasers down on these little ships, and it was 3 of them. And then the screen you'd shoot those 3 things off the screen, and you'd get the same screen again, and you would do that for hours. It's like, okay, this is like a basic game, which you probably paid $30 for, maybe 50, and it had really nothing to it. But it would just keep me entertained for hours and hours. So it was that, and it was that really bad version of Pac-Man from Atari 2600, because everybody back then loved Pac-Man. And, there was that song made, Pac-Man Fever. So I had that too. And it was Donkey Kong, it was Pac-Man. I can't remember what else. I remember I used to like in the arcade this game called Popeye. And we used to eat at this Pizza Hut down the street from our house. And it had a tabletop version of the game, for the arcade, but it was in the pizzeria. And I used to play that all the freaking time when I had the chance. I'd blow quarters on that. Years ago, both Plymouth Meeting Mall and King of Prussia also had, back in the day, and down in near the boardwalk, down in Wildwood, my mother used to go to this ice cream place, and they had an arcade in there too. And I would play there, and around the house there was a steak place, Philadelphia Steak Shop, and it's no longer there. But they had Donkey Kong, and I would spend tons of quarters on Donkey Kong. I spend tons of quarters on what was that game? Matt actually finished it for me one time, and I bought the home version. Dragon's Lair. I loved Star Wars. It was the one you'd go down the Death Star. It was a wired frame game. I'd spend tons of quarters on that. Another one I would play down the shore, though, was the game of Tron, because that was a whole marketing scheme from Disney back in the day. They were smart, where they made a movie called Tron, but then they made, prior to that, a video game that you would play the game and get addicted to the game. And then you would want to go see the movie, because the movie and the game were one. It was a whole marketing scheme. And the game did, it wasn't the best arcade game out there, but it did pretty well, because, again, it was marketed before the movie or somewhere around there just to get you to go see the movie. And the movie was actually, it's not like an incredible movie, but it just was a cult following with that. But the bottom line is, I was a lot of different arcade games, because that was big. And again, I probably didn't finish that thought, but yeah, King of Prussia Mall. It was right around the food court, and then down in Plymouth Meeting Mall was on the I think it was the upper level. I can't remember. They had an arcade there, and it was like, when you're a kid, you go in, it would be darkly lit. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, it was outside. I think it was on the second level. It was a big location, which I don't even know what they did with it. I think they tore it out. Big area, and it was just darkly lit. You go in there, and all you see were these cabinets with all these arcade games, and it was always packed. I mean, it was you couldn't step forth, and you had to wait just to play Dig Dug or Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man or Star Wars or Dragon's Lair. I mean, there was lines on these games, and it was the thing you did when you were a kid. And but then when they made these home consoles, the ports were really bad on the games, but it definitely did make a hurt on the arcades. And Atari 2600 and television really did pull a lot of the people who would go to the arcades, pull them out of the arcades, even with these crappy ports, because the bottom line is you paid $50 for a game, you owned it, and it was much cheaper than spending probably a lot more than that in quarters in the arcade. But it was fun. Either way, it was fun. So anyway, to me, that's a whole nostalgic thing. I bought so many retro consoles of Atari console systems. They make these retro ones. One was for ColecoVision. I actually got the one for Intellivision because when I was a kid, I so badly wanted an Intellivision system, and I never got one. And it was like, yeah, that was one thing. It was like, maybe because I didn't have it, it just seemed like it was so much better. And it really was, and the graphics were just as bad, if not even worse than they were for Atari. They weren't much better, trust me. So anyway, why mention all this stuff? Somebody bought out the Atari branded name. They remade for 2019. It's not coming out until a year from next month. It's not coming out until July 2019. They're going to make a brand new Atari retro console, but it's up to date. So the interesting thing, now I find it very fascinating. It's actually, now Matt, you're going to like this, believe it or not. Not only is it going to play old games, it's going to play new games. You don't care about that. Well, because you mentioned this in the voicemail, it's running the Linux operating system underneath to emulate these games. And it's like the original games you would play on your 2600 on an emulator system that's running Linux. And it was like, I think it's, you wouldn't know about this, Matt, but it's Linux Ubuntu. So that is one of the many different operating systems. It's not in this particular article I'm looking at, but there was one. Oh, wait, yes, it is. Yeah, Linux Ubuntu OS distribution. The thing, which is really cool, because like I am making a podcast on a Linux system. I strongly think Linux is going to make a stronghold in the future. It's always been around. It's always been also underground. It's more for geeks to play fool around with a Linux OS. But Linux is free, so it makes it much more appealing to a lot of different companies and stuff like that because they can get the OS, and they're not paying for it, so, or paying very little, if anything. So that makes it much more, appealing to these companies. And there's a lot of companies that do use some form of Linux, obviously. So that part's really cool. The other part that just really makes me interested in the system, not only because it plays old retro games, it's very slimline, it doesn't take up much room, and they're having two special units. They're having one that does have that whole black grill look as the original Atari 2600 had. It does not have a cartridge holder or anything like that, or a slot. That's removed. But they made it look retro with the grill look. And they actually made the grill not only the appearance of the machine, but the way they designed it is actually used for some purpose on this new Atari VHS system. It actually was designed to use as a cooling system. Like the grill actually are physically separate slots that make up the unit itself. Like they basically are pegged together. It's kind of weird. But you can see this actually on, it's called, I think it's the link you can find it is AtariVHS.com, I believe. And then it sends you, if you want to do a pre-order, they're doing it through this thing called Indiegogo, which is basically, it's like Kickstarter. And you can pre-purchase a system. Now, one of them just comes with the console. Now, they are selling out because I can see some of these units, they're still here. A lot of them did sell out, though. But you can buy, like, the Grandiose system, which is the console, a retro of the original joystick, but it's actually not going to give you blisters like the original one did, but it looks like the original one. And a funky new modern version joystick, because they're going to actually make other games for this system. They really are putting a lot of money into this. But that cost $379, and then plus the shipping is separate. So that's a lot of money. You pay that much for, I think, the brand new... This is a brand new console, but I mean, brand new console, you can actually put games in. Like the, the PlayStation Pro is $400. and also, and they're more powerful too. And also because they dropped the price for the Xbox One X, I think, or at least it's the Xbox One S. You can buy that for $400. So the difference is, yeah, you're going to be playing new games, state of art on those other consoles. This one, you're going to be basically up front. It's going to come with 1,000 available games. They're all old games, but they're all 2-bit games as well. Now, if you're like me and you grew up with those games, they mean a lot to you. And it really does not take up much room. The tabletop system is very small. It does give you options for older games, but they said they're also going to, in addition to that, offer brand new games that are being developed for this console system. So, again, it's really cool. It's just right now I have no money that I can afford to even put a pre-order price down. And by the way, because I looked at, they had a couple small teaser videos. Like one of the games that was big also in the arcade and at home was Asteroids. Now that they did a pretty good job with on the 2600. But if you remember, if you played in the arcade, it had a wire frame kind of look to the video game. Well, they actually have that version and the one for the 2600. So there's a little bit of tweakage on some of the stuff for the games coming for the console. The design is really interesting. Oh, yeah, if you do a pre-order, that's very limited. It's not going to be for very long. But if you remember, if you had a 2600, it had that piece of tape or plastic or whatever. No, whatever. It was like taped on there. Was this wood grain finish on the front of the console. And it wasn't real because, like I said, it was like the console had something on there. It looked like a sticker that made it look like it was wood grain. It was kind of cheesy, but you kind of grew up with that. Or maybe it was even painted on. I don't remember because it's been so long. The new one, not only does it have the black grill that you had on the original console, because they try to make it look very nostalgic, the regular units that are coming out, they're going to be completely black. They're not going to have that wood grain. But there's a very limited amount where they put a piece of wood. Whoops, sorry about that. I just bumped my mic. A piece of wood, physical, real wood, on the front of the console. So where that wood grain panel was just, painted, or a piece of some type of tape or something that made it look like wood grain on the front, the retro ones are going to have real wood. It's physically real wood. It's a little piece of wood, but it's definitely done a lot better than the original one. So that whole thing, it brings back memories again. If you were a person who grew up back in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, and you had one of these and you had tons of cartridges laying all around, you won't have to worry about the cartridges for one thing. It uses, what is it? I want to say HDMI connector. It's state of the art. It's playing older games. Yeah, there's two different versions. The one's very limited. It's called Atari VCS Tribute Edition, and then there's the Onyx Edition, which is just plain black. The Tribute Edition apparently is only going to be very limited, so it probably will never be released, which kind of sucks. Maybe they're just trying to get people to buy it, and they're saying, yeah, it is limited edition. You find out, well, you know what? They kind of lied about that whole thing. But I've heard about this for quite a few, at least the last year or so. There were some stories. Actually, they were dated back, even the ones I read for a couple years before that, stating that, yeah, we're eventually going to make a new Atari console based upon the old console that was the 2600, because it was, a lot of people bought those back in the day when I was a kid. So it finally is coming to light that, yeah, they actually have more than just a prototype. They actually have it ready to just disperse by next year. Just working out a couple, I guess, final bugs and things on the system. So it says at a glance with Atari VCS, you can basically play games, obviously stream them, connect to the internet to get other programs or games, customize the unit, voice command, and it says curate. So I don't know what that means. I'm not going to. There is something underneath. What does curate mean? Personalize and store playlists for this content of all kinds. Engage and share across your favorite social platform. Yeah, I heard something about you be able to have like friends and stuff. You know, it's not like the original console. It's trying to keep up with today's times. It's just again, it's going to be a retro console. It's supposed to have the feel of the old, not quite look the same, but the feel of the 2600, but in 2019 though. So the thing that's interesting that I didn't mention yet is actually AMD is going to make the processor for this system too. It'll be an APU. It's a AMD Radeon processor. It's not going to be very powerful though. It's going to be actually pretty weak. But the thing that brings interest to me is the fact that AMD has done a lot of stuff that you don't hear about. You hear a lot about, like, for high-end gamers, all you ever hear about is NVIDIA. You don't hear much about AMD, which AMD, also makes, obviously, video processors. That is a video processor. AMD makes the CPUs. AMD was a company that was always competing against Intel. Now, all of a sudden, after it was a couple years ago now, actually more than that, where AMD bought out ATI, the Canadian graphics card company, which I didn't mind because ATI was a really horrible company for years, and then they made something which is still named the brand they use of the Radeon, which just revolutionized the company that was just ready to, it was failing miserably. So they still weren't making enough money. They weren't keeping... They were keeping very close, but they were always second best to NVIDIA. AMD bought them out, kept them alive, incorporated their technology and their factories, and just changed it from ATI to AMD. AMD then had the capability of making what's called an APU, which is both your CPU and GPU all on one die. So because of that, AMD was able to now, since they had captured this company who made video cards, they were able to make that company make a profit, because most of their profit, I believe, for AMD was not as much with their CPUs, was with their, that ATI company they bought of making GPUs. That's where they're making their money. Well, not anymore. I think it's a little bit of both. So, that being said, it seems like AMD has really been able to grasp into, a lot of different areas of making these GPUs, with their graphics part of their company, formerly known as ATI. And I mentioned this in a prior show. They invested into the consoles, which is making them a lot of money, I think, into making their GPUs or incorporated into the Radeon branded ones, into Sony's products for the Sony PlayStations, into Microsoft's products of the Xbox, and also a lot of their stuff is going in lately into a lot of Apple's Mac systems, the Mac Pro, the iMac Pro, I should say, the laptops, a lot of their desktops that they have, all are running AMD processors. Well, why is that? Because technically NVIDIA is the power horse for gamers. Well, I hate to say it, if you want something, you don't play a lot of games, you want something that's going to give you powerful graphics, not super powerful, but good enough to play games, 4K, programs, and other things, you're going to go for AMD because it's much cheaper, and it's much cheaper for the manufacturer to buy an AMD chip where they don't have to worry about buying a graphics card because everything is on one chip. So now, why it's an interest to me is the fact that now I'm seeing that, wow, people are this new company who has taken the Atari brand and it's going to resuscitate an old dead company known as Atari, because Atari's been gone for years. It's just a name that somebody now bought and is going to make a new console. They're incorporating AMD into their APU. It's going to be an APU of AMD. So that's like incredible to me. That shows to me that AMD is not dead. So not only is God not dead, but also AMD is not dead, because that seems like that was a system that was, pretty much dead, but it's not. So you have AMD, you have Linux, you have an entertainment system that looks really kind of cool, which is very expensive, because it's basically made from a bunch of people probably who are diehard retro game lovers when I was a kid, who really wanted to see Atari come back. So this is their attempt to do so. Unfortunately, it's going to be a year from now, and unfortunately, I can't afford to spend close to $400 at this point to, plunk down on one of these systems. When I can finally do so, I'm afraid to say that these units are going to be sold out for these pre-orders, which is okay, because I don't want to get myself into any more debt. I've already done so. So, I actually got near an hour. I was not even expecting to get past a half an hour, but I got close to an hour, so I'm not complaining about that. There was one other story I saw on Facebook, and it was I don't know if it's fake news or whatever, but it looked really cool. So, and I forget what country this was from, but this girl had developed something it's titled Wearable. Basically, it's like this woman, this girl lost, what do you call it? Feeling in her nerve endings on her fingers and other parts of her body. So she started to develop a cyber suit that allows her to feel things that she lost, her sensation in her fingertips and stuff. And the thing is actually really cool. And they said eventually, because I haven't watched this video since like the day or so ago that I first saw it, eventually they're going to use it for therapy as well, because not only does this thing help her, it sends signals, I guess, to your some part of your body, like I'm going to say your back, your spine or something, that kind of overrides dead nerve endings in your fingertips and other parts of your body. It was like, wow, this is like incredible. This is definitely futuristic. Is it real or not? I don't really know. But it is really cool, the video. And girl's really hot, too. So that's besides the point. But no, she's actually developing this thing. And they said they're going to even use it, like I said, for physical therapy for people. Because the fact that it's sending impulses actually can help fix problems when you do have nerve damage and things. So there's I'm not doing a very good job of describing this thing or how it works. But the whole thing sounds really cool. I made a joke to a friend. I said, yeah, it's like Iron Man Lady. But she's showing, because I'm watching it and trying to describe what's going on. She also said they're going to use it for virtual reality things, too. Because the problem with virtual reality right now is you can see everything around you. You can physically feel like you're in a three-dimensional room, like you're actually physically in this scene, if it's outer space or a haunted house or something. And trust me, I've jumped a couple times. I finally pulled out after about a couple weeks. I finally pulled out my VR system and put it on again. I was like, wow, this is still very cool. I just really didn't have much of a need to put it on lately, so I have not. So I did and was like, wow, this is really cool. But what is one thing that's missing in a virtual reality even is you don't get a feel for your surroundings, because all you do is you physically see it, but you can't touch it. So this is playing this has many uses. It has a lot of different types of use. Oh, wow, I'm missing Doctor Who. I did. Damn it. Sorry about that. I forgot Saturdays and Sundays Doctor Who is on this one station. And To me, that's very important. It is. I'm not going to lie about it. To me, it's very important. But yeah, this whole cyber suit thing is really cool, and I did want to mention that too. So, hey, I'm going to end my show, and I actually got somehow almost an hour out of it. I don't know how. Well, probably because I had that long, lengthy, long, lengthy thing from Ken Matthews, but it was really worth it for me for, trying to have other people listen in on it. But, yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention was, I've been telling people, I guess I mentioned a couple shows, was watching Hercules. And I did write him back again, Kevin Sorbo, and I think at this point it's like, okay, I was being nice once, I'm not going to be nice anymore. Probably freaking the guy out. But it's true, though, not with it. Well, that's true, too. No, the thing I was going to say is Kevin Sorbo, when he played in Hercules, I remember watching the show back in the past and turn it on. Not watching it, turn it on and just turn it back off again. It's like, well, it's kind of dumb and really silly and stuff like that. So the thing that kind of stuck in my mind, though, was like, is this stuff like just like goofy stuff they made up about all these, these different types of gods? I think I mentioned this the other day. This can't be true. There couldn't be all these different types of Greek mythological gods. And I looked up a couple of them on a couple of the shows, and it was like, wow, this is actually, very heavily exaggerated and made to be more of a farce than really, more of a comedy than like being taken seriously. But, why you do this stuff is, to teach somebody something. You do something like certain things people have a difficult time, or they just have no interest in learning about, and that would be, about history and stuff. Well, Greek mythology is, it is history. Is it really important? It depends. If you're into history and you want to learn everything about it, then yeah, it is very important to learn about. But most of the stuff was extremely glossed over when I was, in high school, because I remember I had taken a class about ancient civilizations and stuff like that. But they never went into the depth about Greek mythology like this show does. So that being said, it was like, wow, I looked this stuff up and never knew any of this stuff. So why is this important? Well, or why am I mentioning it? Well, that's kind of funny, though. The show was very popular, and the thing that sticks out, though, if you want somebody to learn something, sometimes the best way to do it is put it in a form, like when you have to take nasty medicine and you really don't want to take it. What do? You kind of put it in something like a food or a sweetener, something that, like if you're a kid, that they're going to, like they won't take it otherwise, but you put it into candy or some ice cream or something, then they're going to take their medicine. Now, these are two different things. I'm trying to make a really bad analogy, I guess. Or yeah. Or when you have a pet and you have to give your dog or your cat some medicine, and it's like they don't want to take it because it's a pill, they won't eat it. So you put it into her food, and then they eat it because, they're going to eat the food because they like the taste of the food. So it's almost like that. Again, a really poor analogy, but it's almost like that with Hercules. Like, you don't even realize that you're actually watching this show and you're actually learning something without even realizing it. And it's goofy, yeah, and it's a little bit, I can't put it any other way. It's like it feels like a farce because it's just a complete slapstick humor a lot of times. But at the same time, without even knowing it, you're learning something about history. So, sometimes like trying to teach something to somebody that doesn't want to learn or is incapable of learning just because of their attention span or whatever. Sometimes that's the best way to teach somebody something is by adding a little bit of, this is, again, a bad analogy, add a little bit of sweetener to it, because that way, before they know it, you're learning something and you don't even realize you're learning it. So that's what I wanted to say. I don't think I'm going to do any better than what I just did for why, it's kind of interesting. I find Hercules very interesting. Again, it's not like my cup of tea otherwise. I just kind of liked Sorbo, and I wanted to learn a little bit about what other things he had, worked on or worked in with production. And I know I really liked a film he had, like I said, he had acted in, and that just kind of like is where it's coming from. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to link some stuff I'm seeing on Facebook, Farcebook, and from there I'm gonna sign off. But you know what? For those people that are fathers, I just want to say have a happy Father's Day as well. Because tomorrow's is a big day for fathers. Mother's Day had passed, and before you know it, it's going to be 4th of July. It's hard to believe that's actually coming up now too. So anyway, as my friend Matt would say, everyone, anyway, have a good and safe Father's Day weekend. It's not really a big holiday, but it is not really a holiday at all. But I just wanted to say that. So thanks again for listening to me. This is Walter from iWalter on this June day of hot weather, signing off for now and cooling off for now too. Okay, have a good one.